I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Reading Municipal Light Board of Commissioners meeting on today, April 20th, 2017. This meeting of the RMLD Board of Commissioners is being broadcast live at RMLD's office here at 230 Ash Street in Reading, Massachusetts. The meeting is being videotaped for distribution to the community television stations in Reading, North Reading, Wilmington, and Lynnfield. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items of the official agenda as well as items that are not on the official agenda. We ask that all questions or comments from the public be directed to the chair and that all parties, including members of the RMLD board, act in a professional and courteous manner when addressing the board or responding to comments. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuing discussion. Well, again, welcome. A couple of comments. So Wendy Markowitz is unable to attend. Will we have a finance report as well, or we won't attend this evening? Okay, so we'll save that for the next meeting. Also, I want to introduce and welcome our new Reading CAB representative, Neil Cohen. Very glad to have you aboard, Neil. Welcome to the...
Nice to have you here, Neil.
Thank you.
Yes. And also, we were expecting Peter Leidecker, but...
Probably because there's no financial.
Yeah.
I don't think he can.
Okay. Very good. Okay. I'm sure he's watching on TV, or will when it's broadcast.
Yes.
And also, we have a guest here, Mayhew Seavey from PLM Electric Power Engineering. So we'll have you up and speaking to us shortly. Thank you for coming. And Dave Hennessy, would you mind being board secretary for the...
I don't mind at all.
Okay, good. So we'd like to see if, do we have any CAB comments? Neil, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to
I did not have anything.
report? Okay. I don't know if there's any public comment. I don't see or hear anything, so
Yep, okay.
say we don't have any public comment.
I might just make a comment about the CAB meeting, if
I
you
was
would.
just going to say, would you
Oh,
please...
Chairman.
Yes, John?
Thank you. Thank you
April
very
5th
much.
meeting.
I'm
I see
totally
there's a
very
rush
sorry.
to move me along, which I can certainly understand.
It was an excellent meeting with the CAB review the RMLD capital budget with some excellent questions, I believe, addressed to the team that did present, to be noted and answered afterwards. The CAB commended the entire RMLD team for a job well done at the end, because it was a very Herculean effort getting this capital budget together. Following the meeting, we had a tour of the new Wilmington High School, which was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, nice.
It was excellent, and George had given us a tour of it, and it really, I think, reflected the forethought of all the materials that were used in the building, and just the general layout of the facility was just wonderful. So,
Good.
thank you, George.
Good. Yeah, good. Thank you, John. So just for everyone's knowledge, we'll be presenting the operating budget on Wednesday, May 10th here at the Board of Commissioners meeting, and then on Thursday, May 11th, the capital budget review. So stay tuned for that. Okay. My next item is under the chair responsibility. So we're going to, at this time, have a reorganization of the RMLD Board of Commissioners, as we normally do this time of year. So we need to actually vote in a new chair and for the commissioners, and also vice chair. So I'm going to see if we can wrap this into one motion, but depend on what recommendations we get from the board here. But let me start by asking if we could have a nomination for a new chair for the board for this coming year.
Yes, I would like to nominate Phil Pacino to be chairman of the RMLD board and Dave Hennessy as vice chairman for the coming year.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations?
I'll
for
second the
either?
nominations, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I guess any discussion? Okay, I guess my only question is with 25 years of experience. Do you feel qualified, Phil? to
Well,
assume the role?
actually, this is my 31st year.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to start at 25, and if necessary, I was going to bring up, okay.
All right.
We'll take that to be a yes, okay. So, all in favor of electing Phil Pacino as the upcoming chair for the Board of Commissioners and Dave Hennessy as the vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion carries, so that's 4-0.
4-0. 4-0.
Okay. And with that, Phil and I will change
We'll change
chairs,
seats.
so
Pass the
encourage
gavel.
whatever difficult issues you have, please address the chair. That's part of the responsibility.
Very good. Oh, I got this, boom.
Yep.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very
Phil,
much.
congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dave?
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Former chairman.
Dave.
Yes. I'm sure I'll hear that for a while.
Just indulge me for a minute.
Yes.
First, I want to thank the board for this honor. This is actually my 31st year. I've been.
That can't go without some recognition.
I was first, I've been chair on and off of this commission several times. My first time was in 1998. I looked it up the other day.
Making me feel old.
I've seen a lot of change. We were on Haven Street at that point. We were on Haven Street. I actually come to the position this year with no set agenda. Sometimes in previous times when I've come to this chair, I've had an agenda. I got no set agenda this time, other than to act for the best interest of the ratepayers. I've lived through a lot here. I've lived through the 2 votes from the time of Wilmington to pull out of the system and the 20-year agreement that rose from that. I've lived through the ills. Eugene can live through that time too. And the Inspector General, so I've seen a lot. I've seen this building get built around us. And we moved here from Haven Street. I've lived through 4 general managers in my time here.
Hopefully a fifth.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in recent time, I've become more of an elder statesman with institutional knowledge. As I describe myself, we were all on a bus together. I used to drive the bus. Now, years past, I've been a passenger.
It's a good thing.
My whole goal will be to, as chair, will be to guide, not dictate. I represent the majority of your opinions as we're here. And my final thing is, I want to say I fully support the general manager and the direction she's taking the department at this point.
Thank you.
I want to make
Amen.
that statement. And with that, we move on.
Do we have any comments from our newly elected vice chair?
I just think Phil's off to a great start. That was
Yeah.
great. So,
I mean,
I'm
not
excited.
being a
I'm
dictator
excited.
like the former chair. Yes, I agree. Refreshing.
Very good. Okay, and with that, our next thing up is we got Mayhew and Jane, you're the next on the agenda, so why don't you come right up to the microphone, please? And you can make the presentation. This is on the strategy and plan to improve demand reduction at peak time. So,
It'll involve a certain amount of neck craning on my part, but I think it's going to be better if since I'm changing the slides, if I actually know what slide is up there, because otherwise it could prove to be embarrassing. So the starting point for this is the 2000. Maybe I will if I
Oh,
can
sure, come on over.
use that. Otherwise, unless if that cord is long enough to.
Or you could slide down, if you
Well,
want to
would you
just
like to
slide
slide
down a
down?
chair.
Yeah.
You might be able to see it a little bit easier.
Let's see if that will.
Chairman, may I make a comment? please?
yeah, okay.
I just want to make a correction. The slide in here that you just read on strategy and plan to improve demand reduction at peak time, that's Mayhew's next presentation, correct? That's not, what we're doing right now is the title of,
We're gonna touch on that, but it's not the main focus of this.
it's just the wrong page is my point. It's the title. Go back one slide, Jane, please. This is this presentation. We have an incorrect slide in here that's a different attachment for when we do that main presentation
Okay.
on the demand.
On the iPad.
On the-
The iPad is different than this, is what you're saying.
We do have the correct attachment, it's just the
but there's a title page in there that's wrong.
Okay.
Okay,
Ah,
all right.
okay.
So what we have been working on is essentially updating the cost of service study that was done 3 or 4 years ago as the basis for designing rates that will accomplish a number of things. And one of the things that we hope to accomplish with the rates is, in fact, to send you send price signals to customers to control the peak. But it's not the primary function of doing the cost of service study at this point. It's really more to provide a foundation, an analysis of how the rates are performing currently, and then to provide some options as to how to restructure rates to accomplish some of the goals that RMLD might have. So we started with a model of fiscal 16 cost of service. We updated that to reflect the fiscal 18 operating budget and keeping sales constant. Basically, we increased it in order to get to reach the target rate of return. We increased revenues, customer and distribution revenues, by 4%, and adjusted the streetlight rates to reflect the formula rate that's allowed by statute. This slide shows a summary of the results. The results show rates of return by class that vary from, a minus 2.7% for basic residential customers, up to as high as, we get the right button there, as high as about 28% for the industrial class. The overall rate of return is the target, pretty close to the target, 8%. Comes in at 7.9%. Class rates of return vary from minus 10 to plus 28. These are pretty comparable to what we found in fiscal 13 when we looked at this back in 2014. And they're well within the range of what I see with other municipal utilities. I've done design rates now for probably 30 of the 40 Massachusetts municipal utilities, and this is pretty much right in the range of what we expect to see. A good part of what I'm going to talk about are subsidies that are built into the rates, because this is always a question that comes up. It's always a subject that comes up when you go to design rates. Who's paying? Is everybody paying a fair share of the cost of running the utility? And I'm going to start off with my economist hat on and say that electric rates, retail electric rates, really cannot ever reflect the actual cost of providing service, because the cost varies enormously. The cost of energy varies hourly. So unless you're charging customers a real-time rate, there's always going to be some subsidization between customers who use more electricity when the cost of energy is low and customers who use more electricity when the cost is high. In addition, an increasing portion of your cost structure these days are capacity and transmission costs. And those costs are incurred in very specific ways. Your cost of forward capacity, which is almost doubling over the next couple of years, is determined by your load during the New England peak hour, 1 hour a year. And if a customer happens to be offline during that hour, they're still going to pay the cost of capacity through the rates the way they're designed. And similarly, transmission costs are incurred on the basis of 1 peak hour a month, and actually it's not your peak hour, it's the transmission grid peak hour. So it's very difficult to design rates that accurately reflect the cost of service. In addition, another big piece of your cost picture is your distribution cost, and just common sense, distribution costs are going to vary depending on where you're located on the system. If you have a large customer who's located right next to your substation, it costs very little to deliver the power from the substation to them. But everybody pays by agreement, by tradition, and by, in other jurisdictions, a regulatory requirement, a network-wide cost. So there's a socialization that takes place at every level of rate design.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure, go ahead.
How much is the variability? So if you have a customer that's really close to a substation versus one that's the furthest away, how much is I know we're not charging anything different, but what is the actual difference in cost? Is it substantial?
Well, if you think the average cost of distribution is probably about 4 cents a kilowatt hour, a customer located right next to the substation, it's probably costing you less than a cent to deliver that, and it could be as much as 7 or 8 cents on the other side of the system.
Okay.
So it's a big difference.
Yeah.
It's probably way more than the amount of subsidization for instance, solar net metering customers. But nobody ever thinks about it in those terms, that in fact there's a lot of subsidy that goes on.
Thank you.
There are also political considerations that are always present in rate design. Residential customers in both municipal and private utilities tend to be viewed as a favored class of customer. In municipal utilities, they elect the commissioners in many cases. Municipal utilities view them as a privileged class of customer, and we don't need to earn income from the residential customers. At the private utility basis, when an investor-owned utility in Massachusetts goes in for a rate case, the state attorney general's office is there representing the residential customers more often than not. And so they bring in their experts, they push down on the rates for residential customers. The Associated Industries of Massachusetts is there representing the industrial customers, so the small commercial customer ends up picking up the balance. In addition, of course, large customers are viewed as employers in the town, as being subject to competitive pressure and having choices that small commercial customers don't. Small commercial customers, are usually tied to the local economy. They're not going to, the convenience store is not going to move over to Woburn if the price of electricity goes up a couple of cents. Whereas a large industrial customer could easily move to another location and take all of those sales with them. So there's two basic types of subsidies that I'm going to look at. Cross-class subsidies, which are subsidization of one class of customer by another class of customer. Typically, as we already talked about, residential rates usually don't even cover expenses. Oftentimes there's a negative rate of return. You like to try to design it so it at least pays for itself, but that's more art than science. Basically, all of the net income is produced by the commercial and industrial customers. In addition, there's a subsidization of customers who have renewable generation net metering sources who are not paying a significant portion of the cost of distribution services that they're using. We'll talk about that in some more detail. And then even within each class, there are subsidies that take place because the demand charge that large customers pay doesn't reflect the actual cost of demand, particularly, as I mentioned already, the increasing costs of capacity and transmission. So if a customer has a particularly high load factor, is purchasing a lot more kilowatt hours for every kilowatt of demand that they impose on the system, and they're paying those capacity and transmission charges through a cents per kilowatt hour charge, they're paying more than their share of that, and they're therefore subsidizing customers who have a poorer load factor, who have a peaky load profile and are contributing more to your peak. Something that I've highlighted here in red, which is really important to note, and particularly with respect to controlling demand, is that if customers are not paying the actual cost, then then they don't have a proper incentive to actually control their demand. It's pretty basic economics. If you're selling something for less than the cost of producing it, you're going to lose money because the customer is going to consume more of it and doesn't have an incentive to consume less. And that's where we talk about rate design, trying to shift rate design so that more of that cost is reflected in the rate, and to try to have that happen as accurately as possible. We've looked at three scenarios here to address these issues of cross-class subsidies. And the three scenarios that we're going to look at, they all produce the same overall 8% rate of return. They all produce the same amount of total revenue, but they shift that revenue among customers. The first scenario we're going to look at is just an across-the-board increase, a 4% increase in distribution costs. Then we're going to look at what if we were to produce a set of rates where every class of customer produced the same 8% rate of return. What would that look like, and what would the impact of that be? And then finally, something somewhere in between there, residential rates that break even, and then all of the other non-residential rates produce the rest of the net income that's required to meet the 8% overall rate of return. If we go with an equal percentage increase, this chart shows the impact over here, which is 4%, pretty much actually on a total bill, because the distribution cost, the portion of the bill that's increasing by 4% is the customer and distribution charge, is only about a quarter or a third of the bill. So the actual bill impact is only about 1%, between 1 and 1.5%. The rates of return here shift very little. They go up, rates of return go up fractionally, 1% or 2% for each class. And it's also interesting to note on the competitiveness side that that all of your rates under any scenario we look at are anywhere from 10 to 40% lower than comparable rates from National Grid. So, you're in a situation where competitiveness is not an issue, at least when it comes to the private utilities. The overall revenue increase is $1 million. That's the same in each case. It's about an additional $1 million in revenue. All of the classes' base rates are going to be increased by 4% under this scenario, and the average bill increase would only be about 1%. And the rates of return, not surprisingly, remain uneven. The residential rates are still losing $1.3 million, and the commercial industrial customers are earning you $7 million. So it's still pretty non-uniform, but it's also still pretty much in line with what both private and other municipal utilities do. If we decide to fix this all in one fell swoop and get to a uniform 8% rate of return for all customers, the impact is pretty dramatic. It's a 13% increase for residential customers, even more for residential time of use customers, 20%, and then basically an 11% decrease for commercial, and a 4% decrease for industrial. Looks dramatic. There's kind of a rule of thumb that I often use and hear used in utility rate making, that customers don't notice changes of less than 10%. By and large, large customers will of course notice smaller changes because many of them hire accountants to actually look at those things and report on them. The impact is that the average increase is 1%, but that's anything but uniform. 13% residential, 11% commercial, and 4% industrial. And this final scenario that we looked at is just bringing residential rates up to break even, up to a 0% rate of return, and having having the other two commercial and industrial rates earning about the same. And what that amounts to then would be in this case, there's a much smaller impact. It's a 4% increase for residential rates, 12% for time of use, and that can be fiddled with because it's a relatively small class. There's not that many customers there. The commercial rates would go down 3%. Industrial would be just about flat, a 0.5% increase. So not an enormous impact of doing something like this, is particularly if you can smooth out the residential time of use impact. I didn't bother to do any sort of fine tuning. This is looking at things in a fairly aggregate sense as to what would be required. So these are kind of the parameters that you have to work with in overall class rate design. We're going to talk a little bit more detail about some of the having to do with setting demand charges and trying to eliminate the subsidies that are taking place between high load factor and low load factor large commercial and industrial customers. Oh, that's strange. I'm seeing a different slide there. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Thank you. Hit a magic button there somewhere. The present rate charges demand only to commercial, industrial, and school classes customers, and the demand charges vary between $7.50 and $9 a kilowatt. In fiscal 18, forward capacity and transmission costs alone total more than $16. So the present rates will only recover, demand rates will only recover half of the cost of capacity and transmission, and the rest of it is going to be recovered through a cents per kilowatt hour charge, and that's the same charge that is paid by everybody. So it's a problem. Customers who are using a lot of kilowatt hours for every kilowatt of demand, high load factor customers, are paying way more than their share of capacity and transmission costs. To gauge the level of subsidy, I did an analysis and graphed the percent, the level of of subsidy that each of the 80-odd industrial customers is paying based on the allocated cost of capacity and transmission versus how much they were actually paying through the present rates for capacity and transmission. And you can see that there are customers who are, almost 80% of their capacity and transmission costs are being paid by somebody else. And then you have some customers down on this end who are subsidizing or paying 60% more than their share of the capacity and transmission costs. And it's a direct function of the load factor of the customer, the number of hours that they use each kilowatt of demand. If you take the customer's monthly bill, kilowatt hours divided by kilowatts of demand, the unit that you get is hours. So we look at the higher that number is. If it's 720 hours, 720 hours in a month with 30 days, then they're using that kilowatt every hour. So company, something like, the closest you see to that is a supermarket or someplace with a lot of refrigeration, a load that's really constant, pretty close to 100% utilization. That's a customer who's going to be down here, who's going to be paying way more than their share of the capacity and transmission cost. And the dollar amount of that varies enormously. You have customers who are subsidizing others to the tune of about $60,000 a year, and then there are some who are being subsidized to the tune of $40,000. There's one customer who's actually off the scale over here by a couple of $100,000, and you probably all know who that is.
Quick, can I just question? Are the forward capacity and transmission costs, which are due to increase dramatically, that's going to affect National Grid as well, right?
It does. It affects every utility pretty much the same way.
So on a on a relative basis,
Right, within the northeast Massachusetts and Boston load zone, yeah.
so on a relative basis, everybody's going to be like a tide, raising everybody or lowering everybody
Yes.
at the same time. So
That's right. There is a certain amount, at least, again, within this area.
So just another quick question. If we have such granular data in terms of who's subsidizing what, can another fourth scenario be working with each one of the individual companies so that there is no subsidization, or you get it much more to a neutral capacity? We're talking 80
Yeah,
80 industries. Like
it
81.
seems like that probably a good approach is to adjust the rate not all the way to where the capacity and transmissions costs are going to peak out, because they're scheduled, at least in the next couple of years after that, to go down. And then, yes, absolutely, work with individual customers in either directly or through an energy services company to look at their consumption patterns, at their processes, and find ways to control that. That's the the carrot and the stick.
Right.
But you have to have the price signal correct in order for that to be effective.
Absolutely, but as the world's turning to big data, and I'm not suggesting with your department, Jay, that you do this, but with all the algorithms that I've seen from other places like IBM and GE and whatnot, and in terms of using all the data that's been accumulated, it becomes a pretty straightforward way to do all this adjustment on a pretty rational basis using the right algorithms. And I don't know that exists. I'm just throwing that out there as a possible scenario forward. That do we even want to consider something like that, so that it'd be, where I'm going with this, it's a much more of a levelization than having someone being very subsidized and someone else not subsidizing.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky because customers vary widely in their ability to actually control things like that. Some of it's behavior, some of it's technology, and if you have a process that's relatively inflexible in your company, then there's not a lot you can do
Right.
beyond looking at storage technologies or on-site generation or some other way that you can reduce the demand that RMLD sees from the company.
Right.
And customers have been doing things like that. But with an increasing price signal, there's just that much more that becomes economically feasible to do.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, so to John's point, just want to clarify what you said, John. You're not suggesting changing the relationship between residential and commercial. You're just focusing on the commercial, or are you?
Just focusing on commercial.
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Because
But-
if I were a supermarket and I'm competing with 3 other supermarkets,
Yeah.
we're all being treated the same. Okay, I can handle that.
Yeah.
If one is somewhat significantly differentiated than the other, that becomes an issue.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So, good point.
and I think we touched on supermarket's a good example. So they're relatively inflexible they, I guess other than, 12 to 7 in the morning, their hours of operation dictate, they can't lower the refrigeration for, or just, most of their approach is fixed by the business they're in, so.
Refrigeration, though, has a lot of is kind of a flywheel effect. You can reduce the input, and the temperature really rises quite slowly. So if you're able to target a relatively narrow window, you could very, very easily control that. The same thing is done in air conditioning. If you know that there's going to be a peak at 4 o'clock this afternoon, you can sort of chill, do a little bit of extra chilling in advance of that, and then reduce or turn off completely. So there are plenty of things that you can do with technology if you have the information in advance.
Mm-hmm.
If you using algorithms, using the technology that's now
But
becoming
there has to
available.
be a compelling That's not the focus of business either. It's like we talked last meeting about process. If I'm
Right.
if I'm a process manufacturer and I'm making, some kind of a hospital device or something, the risk of not getting it right and,
Yep.
and losing, production time is measured in millions of dollars.
Far,
right?
far more valuable. That's why you need a really good accountant who can tell you what the cost benefit of doing something like that
Where's
is.
Wendy? We should,
So,
Thank you.
So the approach that we're working on is to create a separate purchase power capacity and transmission charge for customers who are billed a demand charge. Right now, every customer pays the same cents per kilowatt hour rate for purchase power and capacity. We could easily take some of the revenue that's being recovered from commercial and industrial customers through the purchase power and capacity and transmission charge and turn that into a demand charge, recover whatever's left through a kilowatt hour charge, and really start to reflect the price of that capacity and transmission without shifting any revenue between classes of customer. Keeping the amount of revenue that you're recovering from commercial and industrial customers the same, but shifting some of those revenues from energy charges into demand charges. And that will have an enormous impact on the amount of subsidization that takes place within that class of large customers. The impact of doing that on those same 80 customers, if we just shifted the full marginal cost of capacity and transmission, would be some pretty significant increases to the low load factor customers up to, there's one kind of outlier at 40%, but most of these most of the impact is actually plus or minus 5% in doing that, if you look at the great majority. But there are some customers there who will get a strong price signal, and hopefully will do something about it. The amount of dollars involved is also relatively small for most of the customers. There are a few who will be looking at sizable increases, and another few who will be looking at moderate decreases. But by my calculation, about 2/3 of the industrial customers would see an increase, but only 5 of them would see an increase greater than 10%. None of the decreases would be more than 5%, but those are large customers, and 5% decrease in a large bill is something that those customers would probably notice. So before we go on to the net meter, are there any questions on that part? There's a change of subject now coming up. Another area that's getting a lot of attention from utilities lately is the amount of subsidization of renewable generation customers, net metering customers. Your present rate allows the customer to avoid paying distribution for all kilowatt hours that are produced by their solar generator that are consumed behind the meter, and that averages about 30% of the kilowatt hours, and so that means that you're losing about 30% of your distribution revenues for each net metering customer. It amounts to on average, about $3.16 per installed kW of solar capacity. So somebody with a 5 kW solar array, you're losing a little over $15 a month in distribution revenues from that customer. Across all of your solar customers, the actual total amount of the subsidy is only about $1,800. And the average is about $22 a customer per month. You're actually better off than a lot of utilities. You're not paying, you're not crediting the full distribution for kilowatt hours that are delivered to the utility. So you're not actually doing strictly full net metering, and that helps a lot. because the price that you do pay for that is your fuel charge, and that's actually a little bit below the value of the capacity, energy, and transmission that you avoid by that generation that's delivered to your system. So I've looked at quite a few public power systems over the last 2 years, and you're right now are doing better than most in terms of the amount of subsidy that's taking place.
What's more typical? Is it high? It's higher than 30%, obviously.
Yes, the average that I see in terms of dollars per kilowatt is closer to $6 a kilowatt. So, and what well, we'll talk about what you do about that, but yours is about half of that. So. This is a graphical view of how a solar customer looks from RMLD's standpoint. The blue is energy that you're still providing to the customer when the sun isn't shining. The red is the energy that's generated by the solar array and consumed behind the meter, and the green is the excess that's exported out onto the grid. It's interesting to note that if you imagine that shape, this sort of mountain here, which represents the actual output of the solar panel, you can imagine that as that increases, gets bigger, it doesn't actually contribute any more to the electricity used behind the meter. It's already providing all of the electricity during daylight hours. So oversizing a solar array doesn't actually harm you that much. And that's an interesting side aspect of the way you're currently billing for these types of customers. In fact, the more that the customer exports to your system, the less you lose from the customer in terms of the dollars per kilowatt. On this axis is the amount, the loss revenue in dollars per kilowatt of solar capacity. And if only 20 or 30% of the electricity is being used behind the meter and 70 or 80% of it's being exported, you're losing about $1 per kilowatt hour of installed solar capacity. So you actually have an incentive now for the customer to oversize the solar facility, but the customer doesn't, conversely, doesn't have that incentive. The options for addressing this particular subsidy, I've looked at 3 of them. There's actually quite a few more, but these are the most commonly used. The one that I'm seeing implemented most often these days is to simply add a distribution recovery charge or distribution recovery surcharge of a certain number of dollars per kilowatt of installed solar capacity every month. So it becomes an additional customer charge that each customer pays based on the size of their solar array. It's very easy to implement because you don't have to do any additional programming of the billing system. However, it's not really ideal because, as you can see from this, the right number to use can vary anywhere between $1 and $8 a kilowatt. And so if you pick a number, say $3, then there's still subsidies taking place between different solar customers. You're now recovering all of your distribution revenue, but instead of non-net metering customers subsidizing net metering customers, you have some net metering customers subsidizing other net metering customers. So it doesn't solve the question of subsidy, but it does narrow down the group of people who are subsidizing and being subsidized. Another fairly sharp way of doing this is simply to install a demand meter in place of the standard kilowatt hour meter on every residential solar customer or even small commercial. Because it turns out, if you go back to this graph here, the peak demand for this customer is at night, regardless of whether the solar facility is installed or not. And so a demand meter would pick up this peak right here and bill them a completely appropriate distribution charge based on the demand that they impose on the system. Now this didn't used to be much of an option because demand meters used to be much more expensive, but they've come down in cost, and it's now quite feasible to do that. It would mean a lot more billing system modifications, but it's not impossible. In my mind, the best way to do this is to completely separate the solar generation from the consumption and have two completely separate meters. You have one meter on the house that continues to record all the kilowatt hours that are used in the house, and you have another meter, revenue meter, on the solar array that pays a tariff rate for solar electricity based on the avoided capacity and transmission value and the avoided energy value. There's no subsidization at all if you do it that way. And I've seen this done for slightly larger customers. I know of a couple of municipals that do this as a standard for anything over 100 kilowatts, and it's quite effective. But it could be done in small customers as well. It's a lot more complicated in terms of the metering installation that you're going to have and in terms of your billing system, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So those are the options. They all address the issue of subsidization in one way or another. The more effective, basically, as with anything, there's a trade-off. The more effective the solution is, the more complicated and expensive it is to implement. So that's pretty much the presentation, and happy to answer any other questions you've got.
Questions from the board? Tom?
Yeah, I guess mine is just sort of what's, in terms of a path forward.
Right, the next step.
Yeah, what do we do? I mean, there's some good information here. Is there a gestation period for us to think about it and then come back and clarify, or is there a, I don't know. I don't have a recommendation. Just we need to decide what the next step is. And
Yeah, I think we are looking for feedback in terms of, in the big picture, how important it is to address the different levels of subsidization, how important it is to be sending the correct price signal particularly for capacity and transmission, to try to get a rational amount of control on the peak demand.
So, if I may ask a
Go ahead,
question.
John.
So these were three scenarios you picked. I'm assuming because they seemed the most reasonable given the character of our organization and our customers and whatnot, but there probably are at least 3 to 9 more.
There's an unlimited number of
Unlimited
additions.
number that could be looked at, I suppose. But you felt that these were the most reasonable ones, given what we have. Is that correct?
Yes, there's one so there's an extreme, there's something that's so moderate as to be almost meaningless, and then we tried to pick something sort of in the middle. And there's a whole continuum there between.
So excuse me, but is this something then we would address in our strategy meeting?
Question, where we're going. But that's-
Do we have time to address this in our strategy meeting?
I would think you could discuss it. We're trying to resolve any type of rate increases and structures to roll into the budgets and into a July 1st implementation. So with that type of, we have to file 30 days, no?
No,
You no
we
longer
filed
have to?
shortly before July 1st.
The digital world, it just.
Yeah, and we have carefully devised these so as not to have any impact on the budget, per se, since the revenues are the same regardless of which scenario you choose. So for that.
I'm only saying that because everyone's together, so we roll it in because everyone's present. It
Right.
wasn't necessarily connected to the budget, but more of, a July 1st implementation for the budget, for the rates, and
Yeah.
that's what I meant by that.
So let me ask the question, what is the department looking for us to do here with this information? What are you looking for us to do? You looking to make a decision as to one of these scenarios, or what are we being asked to do here?
I think similar to, we committed to doing a cost of service study every 3 years.
Right.
And, I love this type of presentation because it brings, to the table exactly how the rates work, including the numbers of what we need to recover in order to make our rate of return. And it provides that thought of, the time of use, the subsidations and things of that nature. We're bringing in solar and any type of revenue erosion from solar now and into the future. What is that going to look like? I had discussed before, and, Hamid and I have friends out in California where you have, circuits that go down a road and there's nothing connected. They're just standby. And, I'm not saying that's gonna happen here in the immediate future, but you have to design the rates going forwards to make sure that you're not, trying to go back and recover in order to make it fair for all of your customers. And so we just want to make sure that we're strategically thinking, what is it now?
Okay.
What is it going to be in the future? And do we need to make a change now? Do we want to wait? What do we see coming down the pike? And as Mayhew has described, with solar coming in, there is a subsidy going on. And is it at a level now where it's still okay? But if you allow it to continue to grow, does that number get bigger and wider? And next thing you know, you're trying to recover from that, and the increase is much greater. So it's more of that thought process. Jane, that we're going to be strategizing to make recommendations of what we think. But again, it's been pretty standard for at least the 30 years of my experience. We're a franchise. I don't feel like we've ever really had, anything threatening that, because you can't come in and steal our customer. But, things like solar and things like that going into the future, that's an impact. The peak in the cost of peak, and how some people load factor, you're running 3 shifts and someone not running 3 shifts and they're not paying their share. How does that impact the customer realistically? I think it's always easier to just say, well, it seems like it's working, let's just stay there. But we do have changes
Right.
that we just want to make sure that we're addressing. So
Okay.
we can discuss it further in a strategy meeting. It's still
Let's
trying to
do
get
that.
into any
Okay.
type of change for July
I agree
1st.
with that.
What I liked about the presentation is that there's this, I call an indifference frontier from a competitive basis, meaning that our, N-Star and others are significantly more expensive than what we're offering, and they're facing exactly the same conditions in terms of the rates. So it comes down to a question of this whole intra-subsidization of the rate base that we have, geographically based, in terms of who subsidizes who or not, where everybody just pays their fair share as a function of, I guess, the load or other things we might throw into the equation. And I agree with you on the solar. I think solar is great. I love solar. I think we ought to have lots of solar everywhere, but not until they, it starts it really impacting getting a return from solar that's commensurate with what we have to do in terms of providing those morning and nighttime provisions for their electricity. And until they put in a battery of some sort, right? When batteries come out and they stick them on the walls and they can provide their own electricity, yeah, that could happen, and that maybe is what happened in California, right? Tesla's
Tesla's got the
is
power
doing that.
wall.
And-
If I can give just a little example, I know maybe probably isn't gonna like this one because he's still driving a hybrid electric car.
No.
I love solar too. I think cleaning up the planet is a great thing. I think making changes on the global end and also local can be challenging for a lot of the customers as far as changing their future habits or, as you said, processes that can't even stop for a second or they could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. But electric cars are do not have to pay the gas tax in order to use the roads and bridges. And all of the money that's made in the taxes for the gas. They pay for that infrastructure. And so, I mean, that may seem like a good thing, but at what point are you gonna will people turn around and say, okay, we have to, everyone's gonna have an electric car, how are we going to retrieve the taxes in order for these cars to pay? So there's a buffer that people that are buying into electric cars are getting a benefit right now, but at some point, we have to bridge the gap. And the longer people wait, I think, until they come up with a solution of how that's gonna happen,
Right.
you know what I mean? So I'm giving that just as a little example. I see this kind of a similar way.
I think it's a good analogy, of course, except for the fact that the gas tax is not used for road construction any longer. It's
not?
used for, 98% of it's used for some other function.
Oh, really?
So,
I
yeah.
didn't get that memo.
They don't send a memo on those things.
Really?
Right. Yeah.
It is fun.
I'll get back to you on
Okay,
that.
all right.
It's not 98%, but it's a very significant portion that's used for other things other than infrastructure, which is what it was originally designed for.
Yeah. Well, I think there should be a benefit for helping to clean up the planet, but again, if we're all going to do it, and then we still have a fixed cost that we have to pay for, we have to redistribute it. It has to be done in a way that's, strategically done, so that we're not hurting any of our customers. So that's the thought I'm going with as far as trying to
Sure.
maybe even make some minor adjustments in that direction. Do you know what I mean? So that we're
Yep.
covered in the event that this, the Tesla does come in with the new solar roof and the power wall and the electric
Right.
car, and then we're just paying all this money for keeping up poles and wires.
I think it really pays to be strategic about this, to think through the different options that we have in front of us. And that's tied to how many people are doing conversion to solar, and what's happening in California will happen here, and all the federal and state energy policies, obviously. So I think it's a great thing to sort of deal with in our strategy session and choose something that looks appropriate near term that we can all agree to. And I like the scenarios. I think, as you said, they're all net, have the same effect.
Right.
So it's really just a question of the balance internally.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I guess to answer somewhat my own question earlier. So I think, I'm wondering if we shouldn't, that might be part of the strategy session, if we shouldn't think about what, we really haven't provided to you any governing thoughts around what we do or don't want to do. So for example, there are different impacts on different types of customers. So certainly our number one customer, I think, would probably want not to be greatly disadvantaged,
Right.
with,
Right.
so, but that's just an obvious one. But so maybe one thing we need to think about, because options have to be looked at in terms of their relative merit. So you need to be looking at, what are we trying to do? We know at high level we're trying to do, but what are things we're trying to do and not do that we need to make sure whatever we select, now you can get at that by looking at and doing, some analysis over each of the options. But is there anything that, to Colleen's point, what, as we run the RMLD, what do we have to make sure we outline and protect, as part of our strategy, whatever that may be?
And this is really highlighted the more I think about it. There was an article within this last week's papers, which I meant to send to everybody and I forgot to do it, but about on the West Coast, where I believe it's Google that is trying to divorce themselves from PG&E because they've put in so many solar arrays, they don't need the power from PG&E, so they want to disconnect. So, I mean, that's great, except that PG&E is going to be charging them a transmission charge because it's a huge amount of energy, right, that they're using for their server farms and everything else. But I think it's reflective of how technology is changing our industry and our world, that 10 years ago that would be unthinkable, and not today. So I think it behooves us to consider it.
Because we will not be able to compromise the safety of the system.
Right.
For the safety of the workers and the public, whether people are connected to us or not. That cost of maintaining the system remains in the standby, whatever we're charged for providing standby power in the future, that those costs will still be there.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing, and this is ultimately a policy question, which is why it's in your laps. A subsidy is something that exists over time, and when you try to take it away, it becomes an entitlement, and that's what you want to avoid. Is a situation you're saying, okay, this customer is being subsidized. Well, the customer probably wasn't being subsidized 10 years ago, but market conditions changed, the cost structures changed, and the rates didn't change to reflect that. And that created a situation that you now can't fix without disadvantaging one group of customers than another. So it's an important lesson there to keep on top of changes in the cost picture, so that they don't become embedded, and so that you don't then have to in quote, harm people, because it doesn't help to say, well, you've been subsidized for the last 10 years, and now you're just paying your fair share. That I've tried that in the past, and that doesn't go over really well.
That's the scenario of boiling the frog, right?
It
So
is,
kinda do it
exactly
slowly.
right,
Well,
yeah.
you can do that in reverse, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sort of increase slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, May, you did a great job.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Nice
Excellent.
work.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on the agenda. Next thing we have is the general manager's report.
Okay, I just have a couple of updates. As you can see and look around, I think most of you have seen it, the art contest calendars are available and have been delivered to the schools. Thanks to Joyce over there and Jane's group.
Yeah, they look great.
Yeah, they came out good.
Yeah.
Good job.
Terrific.
You
Those
really
were
are.
done in-house this year,
Yeah.
designed in-house instead of farming that out.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, really?
Great.
Yep.
Oh.
That's great.
Good job, Joyce.
Good, very good.
Yeah.
We'll have some for
So-
the commissioners, I hope, because I usually take one in my office and put it up.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have some community engagement updates. The North Reading Town Day will be June 11th. The Reading Friends and Family Day will be June 17th. Shred the Peak educational program will launch around early to mid-May. The website redesign, design of the 2018 historical calendar, and Public Power Week event planning have been kicked off. Our last presentation to the Board of Selectmen is North Reading. That got rescheduled, and it now will take place on May 8th.
Very good.
Colleen, a question. What is the, isn't there something Saturday? Is it Earth Day? Is that something we're involved in? Or?
Yes,
Birthday
yeah,
Saturday.
we'll be at our stay.
Yeah. Is that the town or?
It's the Reading Climate Advisory Committee.
All right,
design.
okay.
Advisory Committee.
Yep. And where's it, do you remember where it's being held? I know you mentioned last,
It's at the Parker Middle School.
Parker Middle, okay.
The Parker Middle School, I believe, is Saturday where it is, so.
Thank you.
All right, very good. All set? Okay. All right, so, Jane, you're next with the power supply.
Okay, I just have 3 quick slides. We're reporting on the month of May here. Excuse me, February.
Yeah.
Gee, we really,
Very good. We're in a time warp.
that's the kind of visionary we're looking for in this job.
February is pretty consistent. What we looked at were heating degrees versus kilowatt hour sales. As we can see through the bar charts here, we had much colder winters in 2013, 14, and 15, as those were increasing, and they dropped significantly in 2016 and 17. The tricky part about kilowatt hour sales is that's sometimes reflective of both January and February based on the billing cycles. So in 2016 and 17, where we have a decrease in our sales, then we have a slight increase. That could be just related to the January temperatures, the January sales, excuse me, that are incorporated in the February bill. So it was a little non-conforming, but what I kind of wanted to capture is the significance in heating degrees days, and the drop in 2016 and 17. The next graph looks at our embedded fuel cost against heating degrees days. And what happened in 2013, 14, 15 because of gas constraints in New England, we had significant increases in cost. And you'll see that on the next slide, especially in regards to the spot market, day ahead in real time. Those have dropped significantly in 2016 and 17, and I'll just kind of jump to this slide. The day-ahead markets and the real-time markets are side by side here. So if we look at those 3 years, we're talking over $100 on average for the month of February. And in 2016 and 17, because of the mild conditions and the lack of gas constraints, those dropped into the $30 consistently in those periods. And that's reflective in the fuel charge that we charge our customers.
And that is just because of the temperature differentials, not because there was more supply of gas or anything?
No, it's pretty much, part of that has the gas supply because of the temperatures, it's available.
Right, but in terms of where the gas goes, it's,
Correct,
yeah.
correct. And then part of it's the portfolio. We have some contracts, the ladder and layer, that come in later that brought prices down. So short and sweet this month.
Okay. Great. All right, any questions or comments from the commission?
No.
All right. If not-
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Yep, go ahead,
her,
go ahead.
Commissioner O'Rourke had asked me a question. Jane, remember when Commissioner Talbot asked about the solar panels on the roofs being held down by the cinder blocks, and we were gonna look into that? Do we have any information on that?
We reached out, we looked at both our solar projects at One Ballardville as well as the one that should be coming online next week at 326 One Burlington Avenue and 326 Ballardville. Because of the access, the way to access those solar is a little trickier. We reached out to one of our customers, Teradyne in North Reading, and they have access to their solar panels where we can walk upstairs to take a look. So we've structured a tour of those facilities because they're pretty comparable. They're all rooftop top models. And I think we have some preliminary dates of May 16th? I think it was May 16th that we had, and then the rain date of the 17th, and we can confirm the dates. And we have 2 CAB members that were interested in seeing that, and then at least two commissioners.
Right.
May 16th
Yeah.
and May 17th.
What's the date of that?
Tuesday, May 16th,
Tuesday, May 16th?
or Wednesday, May 17th.
Do you have a time on that by any chance yet?
8:30 a.m.
8:30 a.m.
And where is it?
And where is it?
It's at Teradyne
Good.
at
Great.
River Park, North Reading.
I know Jane had sent out an email. I can send out another one tomorrow.
Yeah, if you would, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Mr. Gall.
Yeah, so Jane, I think the other, I know Dave isn't here, but I think one of the other parts to that he was looking for is the feasibility of sort of if RMLD had their own solar business kind of thing.
Yeah, I
So-
think from my
So
recollection.
is this sort of a lead up to that first?
I think what my recollection of what Dave asked is if we had a hypothetical situation of if we put solar panels on the garage roof, not taking into consideration the integrity of the roof,
Yeah.
how much would that cost RMLD? And we did reach out to a couple of developers for a turnkey operation, and that was in the range of $200,000 to do about 250 kilowatts on this roof.
Because I think the end game was sort of a cost-benefit analysis. You know, if we purchased that and that became an RMLD asset, the solar panels, what kind of cost-benefit would there be for RMLD?
Okay, I can run those.
Okay.
figures, yeah.
Yeah, and then it'd be helpful for Dave to be here too, because I'm
Yep.
sure there's a follow-up.
Right.
Follow up
Good.
with Dave.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the other thing, I understand we also are looking for other locations for solar panels, people.
Yeah, Jane, when I've read what Dave sent in on his email, and I agree, that was the original question that we've been working on. This question seems to have shifted just a little bit, like what are we doing to solicit roofs in which we would be able to put solar panels up that are just held down by cinder blocks. So it's a very, Dave is viewing this as a very low cost method of throwing solar panels up. And so to evaluate that scenario.
Okay, I wasn't aware of those, because we'd have to look at, you know, providing the owner of the building a lease payment. If we were owning the solar panels, we'd have to look at what do we do with the tax incentive credits that are here, because we can't take advantage of those. So there is an analysis that can be done. I just wasn't aware that that's what Dave wanted us to do.
I think it's migrated a little bit.
Okay.
There's also property tax that they would have to pay when the
Correct.
solar goes on top of the roof.
Right.
So I think the last time we had talked, we went through all of the different components and the three legs of the stool of how you balance paying for it versus, you know, why it would not be an incentive for RMLD to own this. But I think maybe Commissioner O'Rourke can share you with the email and just take a look at that, and then
That would be
maybe we
helpful.
can address kind of the way it's being
Yep.
restructured in the question.
Yep,
Thank you.
good.
All right, very good. Okay, with that, we'll move up to Hamid. You're up for the engineering and operations report. Thank you, Mayhew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayo.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Hi.
Hi.
I wish I could shrink my presentation only to 3 slides, but I have to make it complicated, so you have to bear with me. It's not
You get
that
paid
easy.
by the slide, don't you?
Yeah. So I'm pleased to give you a report for the progress made in my division for the month of February 2017. The first slide, if it's kind of blurry.
We have it here.
You can see that, okay. The first slide shows you the construction projects, basically, and which year to date total spending is $485,000 and 126. On the first project, the distributed generation that we are installing a 2.5 megawatt generator. It's a pilot program, and the construction has started. We poured the concrete pad at station 4. And it's going as scheduled. The generator is going to be delivered on June 1st. Then we got some wiring to do and some testing and to get it ready for July 1st. So that is on target. The next slide shows you another category in the budget for the capital authorization. Those are the routine constructions with construction-related projects. For the month of February, we spent $109,591. That would bring the year total date to $1,171,604. This only represents this item, so there are other items in our capital budget which so far year-to-date addition is approximately $4 million. We got $5 more million to spend, which approximately 2.5 to 2.6 million is going to be spent for that generator. So it's going to bring it up. So we're spending the money. That's a good news.
We're going to turn that on July 4th, that generator.
That's my birthday. It's better be on. That's my birthday present.
Can I ask Joyce to work with Hamid for construction date and possibly set up a ribbon cutting ceremony? Would be
Definitely,
great to
yeah.
have the Commissioners there.
Yeah.
Be a good idea.
That'd be fine.
Yeah. I'm going to be in the
Just
picture,
went to
right?
see the site yesterday, so probably
Okay.
mid-June
Yeah, sure.
would be an appropriate time. We just went and visited the site yesterday in construction. Mr. Zanelli's doing an excellent job.
Excellent job, right, yeah.
Very good.
For a great price through competitive bidding. The next one is, I think you're 2 slides up. Okay. The routine maintenance, we got 7 maintenance programs. That the first one is transformer replacement, which in the Padmont category, we have upgraded almost 26% of the Padmont transformers. In the overhead category, we upgraded approximately 17%. In the pole inspection, as of April 10th, we have 220 poles that have been replaced, and 126 of those, the transfers has been completed. The quarterly inspection of the feeders, this is a program that we do routinely. We patrol the circuits for any visible sign of deterioration or problems, and we have inspected all these circuits that you see, and we haven't found any problems yet. The manhole inspection, we have inspected so far 961 manholes out of a total of 1,237. The porcelain cutout replacement through the February 2017, we have completed 91%. That means we got 253 remaining to be replaced. And as we're making improvements in the areas that they need to be improved and do upgrade the constructions, we are replacing more of those. The tree trimming in the month of February, we 75 spans trimmed, and year to date, it's going to bring it up to 831 spans. The substation maintenance program, we've completed the infrared scanning for the month of February, and we have not found any problems at any of the substations. We also do the parks, and at parks also we haven't found any problems for major customers. The next pole is the double poles. As you know, the ownership, we got approximately 16,000 poles throughout the system, 50% owned by RMLD, 50% by Verizon. However, the custodial in the town of Reading is split between RMLD and Verizon. In North Reading is solely our custodial. The Linfield is Verizon, and Wilmington is Verizon. The next one is my favorite report, that's Engine, and that shows the ball in court for the utilities that they're responsible to do the transfers or to take the pole butts out of the ground and remove them. For the Linfield RMLD, we have approximately 3 transfers to do. In the Reading, we got 23 transfers and 27 pole butts that need to be removed. North Reading, we got 13 transfers and we got 106 poles that they need to be removed, pulled out of the ground. These are pole butts. In Wilmington, we got 26 transfers. We got 4 pole pole butts that needs to be removed, and install 1 guy. So that's the report for that. We're making good progress on these double poles and, making our transfers. But unfortunately, we have to wait for Verizon and Comcast to do the transfers in our custodial area before, we can remove the pole butts, but we're keeping up with them. This is a good program, so at least it shows who is the next party in order to take care of that. The next slide, it's the RMLD reliability indices. I'm pleased to announce that, we're with the new reliability tracking that we are a member of from APPA. It's an APPA program that, all the utilities, most utilities that they have purchased the program, they are reporting their indices, and we are one of them. So we got the numbers from for the SAIDI, KD, and SAFE, the latest for 2016. The report just came out, and it shows that we're well below the national and regional average for SAIDI, KD, and SAFE. So our programs that we have in place, they are paying off, such as tree trimming and also all the improvements that we've made and upgrades and the maintenance programs. However, we got a long way to go because, as you know, the maintenance in the system hasn't been done, for over 15 to 20 years. We're behind that. So we are trying to catch up, and we got a way to go. So these numbers could oscillate, go up and down, but at least the trend looks like, we are on the road.
2017, if I may, that's just reflecting year to date, I'm assuming.
Exactly. That's right. The
Still
2000.
significantly
Yeah.
lower.
We are
previous years.
getting better and better, but again, I got concerns about some areas that we need to beef up the maintenance, but we are just doing the best that we can do with our current workforce, and as well as the program. We got a lot to do. The last slide shows the outage causes from 2012 to 2017. As you could see, the equipment makes 35% of that, trees 30%, and wildlife 21%. And on the left, you see the 2017 month of February. They say the contributions of the equipment and trees and the wildlife to those outages. Excuse me. It's interesting, because the wildlife, even though we're adding these wildlife, to the equipment to save the animals from killing themselves. However, the other day was interesting that they got right under the lifeguard, that the squirrel, and had an outage in Linfield. So I guess they find their way. This is the mating season, and they are getting under the lifeguard. So that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
None here?
Any questions or comments?
The only comment I have is just if you did a forward multiplication of the outages causes, it looks like it's working very well through
Yes.
the whole reliability
Yes.
program. I'm not talking percentage basis,
Yes.
but just an absolute number basis.
Yes,
If you multiply it by 5,
Right.
it's significantly lower. So
that's right.
it's just testimony, I think, to the way the program is working.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good
I have
point.
one question too.
Sure.
On the Sadie and Safety and Katie numbers, that's year-to-date, so those are not, we're not like expecting those numbers to go up because of seasonal things, right? It's really
No,
low in
that's right.
2017,
The Sadie,
year-to-date.
right, that's right. Year to date, the Sadie and Safety, they're going to go up as, is we experience more outages, the KD also, that's the pocket of outages, that relates to number of customers. There are lots of pockets that you could have when you have major events.
Right,
And that number is usually higher than the other two.
right.
But the frequency of outages are nothing right now because, even though we had, a couple of storms, this
been
winter, it
mild
hasn't been, it has been a mild winter.
Right,
And, but hopefully that's going to stay the same.
right. Good.
That's what our goal is.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And if not, we'll move on to the procurement. Do you want to say somebody's going to read the motion, and then we'll get a,
Rod, be happy to read the
yes, if you would, please.
the motion. Move the proposal 2017-33 for hourly rates for overhead line construction and maintenance work as needed. Storm management line construction and restoration to be awarded to Powerline Contractors, Inc. as the lowest responsible and eligible bidder pursuant to MGL C30 and 39M on the recommendation of the general manager.
Okay. The only thing I think, the question is, do we need to add the cost in here?
Yes,
Yeah, so if after the word awarded to Powerline Contractors, Inc., if we add for a total cost of, and the number I've been given is $746,760.
that is correct.
So if we could add that in,
Sure.
the main motion, motioner, accept that as part of the main motion.
A second?
Yeah, and it's been seconded. Discussion? You want to give us a,
Sure, by all means. This is the contract. We're hiring contractors just as part of the overall major construction upgrades that we do throughout all 4 communities. So they're going to help us with that program, as well as during the system emergencies if we need to augment our forces in order to restore faster. So we send a bid out to 30 companies. 2 were the responsible and responsive bidder, the Powerline Contractors or Construction, and the Matrix Construction. So this is a 3039M project. The lowest, the bid, the lowest responsive bidder was Powerline Contractors at the price of $746,760. Matrix came on at $796,704. So there is approximately $50,000 lower
Difference, yeah.
price for the power line contractors.
Any discussion from the board? If not, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, that motion carries. Let the record show it was 4-0.
Thank you.
All right, so, our next meeting is scheduled to be the strategic meeting on May the 2nd, and then we got the operating and the capital budgets. Tom's cheat sheet asked whether we should start these meetings at 6 or 6:30.
The May 2nd meeting?
Yeah, the May 2nd will be the strategic meeting,
Sure.
and then May the 10th will be the operating budget, and May the 11th will be the capital budget.
Can everybody make the 6?
Can we do this?
Is this the Tuesday, Phil? Is that for all three meetings, which I just wasn't sure?
Well, I don't know, that's the question.
May 2nd.
Do all three.
Right,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you want to start at 6 or 6:30.
I'd rather start earlier if we could.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Days. If
6
everybody
is
can make
fine.
6 is fine,
it. Can you
Dave?
make it?
Yeah, on May 2nd, that's fine. I might be out of town on the 10th and the 11th. I have to get back to you.
Okay, all right, so let's post it for 6 o'clock, Tracy, if you would, please.
Yep.
Okay. I believe that's all we have for regular session. If somebody else has something else they want to bring up.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, just one item. There's a May 3rd CAB meeting. We do need a representative to go to that. I think, Tracy, I'm available to go to that if you want me. If I can certainly go to that. So put me down for that.
All in favor?
Oh, put me down for that one.
New chairman?
Yeah.
Put me
Yeah.
down for that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Leading by example, that's
Yeah,
great.
that's fine. Okay, you had something, Tom?
Yeah, just a question, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to remember, is this the time of year we also re-elect the committee
Yes,
members?
yes, we have, the subcommittees we need to put
Yeah,
together.
I don't know if we're prepared to do that tonight or not,
Yeah,
or
I haven't got the
should we do that
list of
next?
what we're doing at this point.
Can we do that? Does it matter if we do that next week?
We'll do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, I didn't think that was tonight, just based on
Yeah.
historically what's been
Yeah.
done.
Okay.
I did redo the assignments though for everybody for AP and payroll.
Yeah,
so
can
I'll
you
send those
circulate
out.
the list around to all of us as to the assignments? And
Yeah,
and do we have enough people, do we have people covered who's going to assign the warrant and sign the payroll? Is there coverage for those?
Yeah, there is. It's for accounts payable, unfortunately, there's only 2 people who can do it, who are our new chairman and our new vice chairman.
Okay,
When you say
We can only do it, why?
Because you can only do it for 3 years, and everybody else has done 3 years in a row, so Phil and
Oh,
Dave are
shucks.
the only ones who
oh,
can.
too bad. So,
So
you and I?
we'll be busy.
It's a Saturday thing.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I don't.
John and I and Dave are available for Talbot for questions, though.
Yeah,
That's great.
exactly right.
That's
Remote question.
In 3 years.
Yeah.
So, do you
Oh,
want to,
what do we
do you
offer,
want
a
to do
year?
it now, or do you want me to?
Sure, yeah, I can
take
do it.
Take it at this point, okay.
Yeah, I can take it first.
So you'll take it first.
Okay.
I'm always the emergency backup anyway, as you know. You're getting dressed, but you call me in the morning, and I'll come down. All right? And then we'll reorganize the subcommittees at the
Yeah.
next meeting. I think we need to look at what we need to do on that. Okay, with
Sounds
that-
like you and Dave Tennessee want to do everything, so. All in favor?
I don't see you guys getting away.
No, we're trying to be supportive, Mr. Chairman.
We're here for a quorum.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the line? You're behind us all the way, just don't ask how far behind.
Right.
All right, very good. You have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved?
All right, so the motion was moved that the board go into executive session to consider purchase of real property and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining and return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjournment. Mr. Stempen
Second.
made the motion? Mr.
Second?
O'Connor seconds it?
Yep.
O'Connor, oh, good grief. O'Rourke, close. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Poll the board. Mr. O'Rourke?
Mr. O'Rourke, aye.
Mr. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Stempak, aye?
And
Mr. Hennessy,
Talbot.
aye.
Okay, we adjourn to the other room for our executive session.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Phil.
Moving on.